Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. As always, I like to start with laughter because, we're talking about hard things. It is September, so it's Suicide Prevention Month, and we're doing as much as possible to have conversations about hard things. And today, I'm really thankful that I have Steve here from BeniComp. He is the COO, and he's only here in Tampa Bay for 5 years. So we were chatting a little bit about life here in Tampa Bay. And I want you all to make sure on December 26th that you make it a big deal to wish Steve a happy birthday. So Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. So first, I want to explain to the viewers what BeniComp actually is.
Yeah, so BeniComp's a 58-year-old health insurance company. We create unique health insurance products with a focus on managing the health of populations preventively. And we've really become a health technology company that happens to be in the insurance space.
Fun. Insurance and technology. It seems so vastly different.
I think that's the whole point, right? You get into a space and realize how behind the times in the industry is, and it's probably, you'd have to think hard about it, but I would say it's the industry within America that is most ripe for disruption.
I could not agree with you more. Amen to that. I think from the beginning of this pandemic, my mission was to stop everybody from what they were doing in the medical industry and show them what was possible just by little things like telehealth, which is not new, which has been around for a while, but really it's such a slow to technology type of industry. I mean, it's the only industry where I have doctors ask me to fax the proposal.
Exactly. And actually, if you were to say, what were some of the big wins, one of the biggest wins of COVID probably is telemedicine. The fact that people aren't, flooding the emergency rooms or hospital systems, and they realize that they can be seen within minutes for a fraction of the price and have things addressed through telehealth. We personally use it. Our clients use it. I think it's a great tool, and I'm really happy to see that the adoption's been huge since COVID hit.
Well, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it takes really bad things like COVID-19 to push everybody into realizing that we can live an easier life. And I knew the moment I got my parents, who are in their 70s, on Zoom to their physician, and they said, and they're from Ireland, they said, well, we're never going back there to their office. We don't have to leave our house. It's totally different world. So I'm so happy to be talking about technology, insurance, and all things healthcare. And then we're going to segue, of course, into mental health. So, when I was looking at your website before we got on this call today, I noticed that you had Dr. Glad. And I swear, as soon as I saw his name, I just clicked out. And I was like, oh, that's a great company. Because anybody that I feel would align themselves with the caliber of what Dr. Glad presents is certainly a friend of mine in my head until I keep stalking you, Steve.
Yeah, we're a huge fan of Dr. Glad, know him well, and he's from Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is where our operations office is and where the company was founded. We've worked with him for several years. He was actually in the hospital system and couldn't stand that he was being forced to see patients for 7 minutes at a time. Felt like he couldn't get to know the patients, everything, they were trying to push him into the diagnose and prescribe mentality of the health system. And so he branched off and started his business where he could see patients for an hour at a time, get to know them, set them up with health coaches, and work with patients from an integrative functional mindset. And since then, we've talked to him, for years about how we can take something that's as important as integrative and functional medicine and use technology and the major medical health system and do things at scale. So yes, we love Dr. Glad, and I'm so glad to hear that you like him as well.
Oh, well, when I went to my first integrative medicine conference and I heard him speak in Manhattan, I thought there's hope. Right? There's hope because there are way more today practitioners who have not succumbed to that corporate medicine, which is actually just treating chronic disease. And we have found wonderful practitioners that have really taken a huge risk and a huge leap to, as I like to say, kind of break out of corporate, do the things that they love, which is really, really helping patients in a more 2020 way, which includes technology, of course.
Yeah. With Dr. Glad, first of all, I sent my mom to Dr. Glad. Our CEO, Doug, sent his mom and his sister and his niece, and so we really believe in this. But the truth is, the health system, it would blow up the health system if every single patient were to flood the system and then have to see an integrative medicine doctor for an hour. First of all, there's not that many integrative medicine doctors right now. Doctors are used to seeing patients for 7 minutes. It just wouldn't work. And so what we're doing is looking at technology and other tools to take in the population, spread them out, and look at the various risks and find out who's the right fit for some of these visits. So a lot of that has to do with technology, and some of it has to do with plan build as well. But I think it's really important that we look at both of those.
I agree. So a lot of people would agree that the healthcare system is broken. So when it comes to the area of mental health especially, what do you think, Steve, should be done?
Yeah, so I think mental health is somewhat in line with what I just was talking about with technology and integrative medicine, even in that, when people think of mental health, there's this stigma, this belief that mental health is the people who need a suicide hotline or need to be hospitalized, and that can be further from the truth. That might make 2 to 3% of the population, and there's probably 2 to 3% of the population that don't have mental health issues of some sort. So the rest of everyone lives in that gray. And just like the hospital system, you need to look at all the data, look at the people, spread them out, and then say who fits in these gray areas, how do we triage them, and how can they see a mental health professional. And from our standpoint, because we're in major medical, we built these plans, it needs to be built within the plan. It can't live in EAPs or be some supplemental program with limited access. People need to recognize that it is an issue, that it is something that affects the majority of the population. And so we need to fit it into the major medical system.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. So Steve, I'm going to share something personal with you real quick about EAP because it aligns with what you're discussing right now. So when I was 21 years old, I was suicidal. My father worked at New York Hospital. And thank goodness he had an EAP counselor that he was seeing while I was going through my addiction and my depression, him and my mom, and they had these wonderful healthcare benefits. So I was able to go see this EAP counselor. So fast forward now, 26 years later, I, in my history, have run medical companies, have been the practice manager, I was director of operations for New York Medical. Our bigger company in New York, of course, we had access for our employees to have EAP counselors. But in the small businesses that I work with in today, that is not the case. So I really, I'm very interested, of course, I dedicated a chapter in my book to Ben Figueroa's, Tuesdays with Ben, because if it wasn't for that access, and if it wasn't for the employer having that access, I wouldn't be talking to you today. That's a fact.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Can you just expand about that a little bit? I really want the audience to take in what you're pitching out here, Steve, because I love it.
Yeah, so a couple things. One, healthcare is personal, and it needs to be personalized. People are different, employer groups are different, and what employers assume and people assume is that they need to live within this box that is healthcare. And that's not the case. You know, if you talk to a strong consulting company, or talk to us for that matter, there are a lot of options. You can build plans that are right for your company. And so to give you an example, we have a company and it's a school system, and they want to provide the best healthcare for their teachers and staff, and which hits close to home. My mom was a teacher her entire life. She just retired this year. She was the longest running teacher.
Don't deserve the absolute best package. I don't know who does, especially right now.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
And so, you know, one of the things that they said was, hey, first of all, you know, teachers, it's a high stress position. They're dealing with all of these students. And now with COVID, that just, you know, first of all, are they doing school at the school? Are they doing it, you know, through video conferencing? Is it half and half? How are the students reacting to this? They've been out of school for a while. So it's a very high stress environment. A lot of teachers are having to learn new tools and then also figure out how they're dealing with students who have been out of the system for a lengthy period of time, probably the longest in recent history. And so they wanted to give access to these teachers. Well, we built it right into the major medical plan. We're treating it just like a medical service. There's a copay and they have access. And then there's also co-insurance. It's just like a normal medical service. But then beyond that, you know, there needs to be triage in place. And so what our product does is we give annual health screenings to employees, and it's built right into the system through the deductibles. So just by having an annual health screening, you can earn thousands of dollars off of your deductible. But what that does is we get 96% participation. And as part of that, we're including a mental health patient questionnaire. We receive that, and then we can look at not only the blood data, but also the mental health data, and see what the risks are across the entire population, some with lower risks, some with higher risks. We're going to engage with the entire population and educate them. And on the mental health side, we're going to say, you know, hey, this is a conversation that we can start with our health coaches, walk them through their questionnaire, and then triage them to a true board certified psychiatrist, if that's the right path. And so by doing that, you are giving them access, you are educating them, and then you're removing that stigma. So that's what we're doing on our end.
I love it. You know, I've had the great privilege of speaking at corporate events because of my background. You know, having a lot of employees, you know, throughout my career, which gratefully I don't have that many now. I can say that I've done my time. But it really is. It is a very serious job. It is a very serious position to have. I mean, if you really think about this logically, Steve, with me for a moment. You bring on, say, an HR representative into your company, and her or his real background is understanding policies and procedures and such, right? That does not mean that they actually understand mental health. So to have somebody that could be there to triage, and so just for the audience members who don't really understand what we're talking about with triage, you need somebody that can actually ask the right questions, identify what the actual problem is. Like I've said this a few times just recently, because a lot of people ask me, what do I ask somebody if they're suicidal? Well, the question that saved my life was, are you having thoughts of suicide? So if we don't have the proper people asking the proper questions, and we can't really, as employers, you know, corporate, when we're hiring somebody that is in management or HR, whatever we're calling it, to consider them to be the answer to mental health. When somebody comes in and they're having anxiety or they're really stressed out and they need to talk to somebody, you need an outlet. And that is what you're providing.
That's right.
I'm excited, Steve.
Well, but you're exactly right. You know, how do you bring in professionals who know what questions to ask, who can start the conversation, who can answer those questions? You know, how do you figure out the problem of access, education, and stigma? And so I think a big part of what we do is just building stuff into the plan. You know, building it into the major medical plan. Again, employer groups have options. I think what you're going to see, what you've already seen and what you're going to see a lot more of in the future is employers realizing that they do have options. Because I can tell you, despite what several people may think, most employers truly love their employees and want to do whatever they can. Now, no company has unlimited money, you know, maybe Amazon or somebody, but nobody has unlimited money, right? So you try to do what you can with the money that you have. And when you sit down and take the time, Starbucks spends more money on healthcare than they do coffee beans. So when you sit down and take the time to look at your health plan, and then you move into some of these cost containment strategies and look at the plan from a prevention perspective, then all of a sudden you open up free dollars. And what you're going to find the majority of the time, for us, it's almost every single time, employer groups say, wow, we're going to save that much money. Well, can we give some of this back to our employees? Yes, let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about some of these services that aren't usually included with major medical. So there are options. I wish the world would know, that the country would know, employer groups would know that there are options. They just need to sit down and take the time to walk through them and let these consultants know what their employer group and their employees are all about.
You know, I can speak from a lot of experience, Steve, that once it came to November, it was torture to my soul, because I knew we were talking about health insurance now. Okay. And I'm sure Lizette warned you about me. So I would go, oh dear God, you know, now I had a broker. So I worked with All Trust. I love them. I've had them on the show. Joe Park, the CEO, they've been acquired since, you know, I've known for 16 years. And I was very blessed in the sense I had a group that cared about us, because I had relationships, and we were able to talk about what was going to be best for the employees, because I was also blessed enough to work in a company that cared about their employees. But at the end of the day, when it came to, you know, explaining it, and the copays and the deductibles, I mean, it was not an easy time. And I don't think that employers realize, dare I say, how many choices they have. And I think one of the other advantages, which I actually like this spin, Steve, that we're talking about advantages of COVID, because there's certainly been enough disadvantages, is a time for everybody as we go into this season of November, which used to be not only preparing for the holiday extravaganza with the families, which thankfully we can all do virtually now. I'm kidding, I love my family. But
except for the birthdays.
Except for the birthdays, Steve. So I really think that now is the time for everybody to understand that they do have choices. And you really need experts like your organization to be able to explain. You know, I would know enough to be dangerous, as I like to say, with practice management, to explain to the employees what was actually going to happen. But I would bring in a team and have them really go through all of those benefits, and the mental health being very, very important. And now it's just more important than ever. So yeah, what you got to say about that, Steve?
Yeah, what I would have to say is, did your conversations in November usually go like this? Okay, everyone, let's talk about healthcare. The options are bad and worse. And just like every year, it's gotten a little worse. We're going to offer you a little less, and it's going to be more expensive.
Yeah.
Which is a sad.
You know, I'd like to say I would have to mentally prepare for when I was going to sit down with the physicians to tell them about how bad it was, and then plan how it was going to be presented to the employees. So yeah, November, is blissful for me now, but yes, continue. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want everybody to realize that this is a very tough time and we're going into this season soon.
Yeah, it is tough. And I honestly, I think it's as tough on the employer as
Yes.
it is the employee, because the employer wants to do right by their employees, but again, they just don't know if they have options. And one of the issues is that a lot of these brokers are given the choices, like here are your four choices, or here are your limited options. You've got to figure out which one of these options you can squeeze this employer group into, and that's really, I think the good news is that we're seeing a lot of change there. We're seeing people get more creative. Like anything else, it's out of necessity. The healthcare expenses have skyrocketed. They've gotten more expensive every year. Employers can no longer afford it. So then what they did was they raised all the deductibles to lower the cost. All that did was shift the expenses over to the employees. And then the premiums continued to get more expensive until finally everyone threw up their hands and said, okay, we need to do something different. So there are a lot of really good companies that are coming out of the woodwork. Companies from outside of the healthcare space. I'm personally, I came from 3D animation, and multimedia.
I
So
came
I
from
was
telecom, Steve.
Well, but I think it is important that you bring in the inventors, the tech firms, companies who look at the healthcare space and say, who haven't been exposed to it for 10, 15, 20 years, 25, 30, 40 years, and say, hey, this is crazy. This is how things are operating, and you start digging in. It's almost like you lift up the hood and you see what's going on underneath the hood, and you're like, wait a second, half of the expense here is completely unnecessary. Let's cut out the waste. Let's look at better cost containment strategies. Let's get rid of all this, the paper and the manual processes. Let's open up, free up some money, and then let's put this toward things that are important, like prevention and mental health. And you're going to see a lot more of that. So what I would tell employer groups is, we would be more than happy to even push them to somebody else, or just at least lend some guidance. But take a second and become educated, talk to your broker, talk about, hey, in a perfect world, this is what I would want. Can you make this happen? And force them to do some due diligence and look into services like mental health and prevention.
I think that's a great idea. I think everybody should have a wish list. I think they should.
I say it all the time. It probably drives all of my employees nuts, but anytime we go into a project, my immediate thing is, all right, perfect world. If you could just make it up and forget about any sort of blockers or anything like that, just give me perfect world scenario. And if it's not possible, you'll have to tell me why. But what we're going to do is start with perfect world, and then we're going to work our way toward perfect world and just chip away until we get a lot closer. And even if you only get half of the way there, it's drastically better than what you're looking at right now in the healthcare system.
Absolutely. I think that what you're providing is really fantastic. We're going to have all of the information in the show notes of how to learn more. I'm definitely going to want to learn more, especially because Dr. Mehra is a part of it. He's been phenomenal in this community. I love all the associations that you have currently. I love that you're here now in Tampa Bay, the best place on earth.
We love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You've moved to the first wellness district in the country that's being built, thanks to Jeff Vennick, Go Lightning. And so Steve, we're thrilled to have you here, and I can't wait for everybody to learn even more. You're a 50-plus-year-old company, though. It's incredible that it takes somebody like you from a 3D animation background to come in and do exactly what you said. Look under the hood and let's figure out what's wrong and provide a solution, which is what we all need. So, Steve, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Really loved talking to you.
Thank you. So don't forget, if you mention that you have seen the show or listened to the podcast, Thai Technology, 3 months for free.